This is a talk, I think, that risks preaching a little bit to the converted. And I look around this audience, I suspect that many of you are the converted. But I know that many of the splendid companies represented here are not so well converted. So I hope that if it doesn't convert you, it will at least help you convert the other slower moving traffic in your company. And if I see many people looking at dolphins, I recognize that I'm neither converting nor helping anyone and will get off. I have some sympathy with the kind of older guys who, in many cases, are responsible for the ultimate decisions in companies, because it's now nearly 34 years since I first sat down at my first desk in my first media department. And in those intervening years, as a media agency wonk for quite a long time as a client, and in running media companies, I've lost count of the number of presentations, articles, speeches that I've done in which I've expressed my breathless amazement at the relentless change in media. The constant change of new TV stations delivered over the air, via cable, via satellite, launch of commercial radio during that time, the occasional launch of a new newspaper, and the relentless circle of birth and life and death that characterizes the magazine jungle. But what is happening now is not that. You see, for all the comings and goings in the media sector, the DNA of the British media has been pretty much static for the last 50 years, since the start of commercial television in 1953. What has happened since then has been evolutionary change. For the most part, each change has been a step on from what has gone before, and it demands a reaction that we're pretty good at, actually. The appraisal of the new and the comparison with what's gone before, and on that basis, characterizing our new policies. So that's been evolutionary change. Even the big moments when Channel 4 was born. I was a media planner in 1982. Yeah, I know you were 5, but bear with me. And it's hard to recapture the impact that the arrival of this new TV station had on the media business at the time. Bear in mind that up to that point, if you wanted to buy a television campaign, you had one choice: ITV. Those were the days. No satellite, no cable, no Freeview, no internet, obviously, no mobile. So when Channel 4 launched, we were all going, oh no, fragmentation of audiences. Is it all over for mass media? Where will all this end? Well, now we know. The two muses of the last year, technology and personalization, see what I've done there, have inspired an infinite growth in supply of media choice, which has rendered our business incomparable to what it was before. You see, in 1982, the media consumption of two people from similar backgrounds and of similar ages was, well, similar. If the menu only has a few items, it follows that many of us will choose the same dinner. But as the supply of choices grow, I think it's probably fair to say that no one in this auditorium now has consumed the same media as somebody else over the last 24 hours. The media we've been enjoying over that time may be the traditional stuff, expensively produced by professional experts. Perhaps it may have been rescheduled on demand to suit us rather than the scheduler. It may, frankly, have been user-generated stuff created by idiots. It quite likely included some stuff of interest to audience groups too tiny to have been economically viable before. And a significant proportion of what we might call that media time will have been spent with what you would not call content at all, but with search and email, social networking, occupations that used to take up 0% of our media time. So this is my point, that there's a difference between change and change. What we're looking at now is not just the latest twist in the media story, which is the kind of lowercase change we've been used to. This is capital letter change. This is a change in human behavior which demands a strategic stop on the way that we do things and a moving forward on the basis of reconsidered policies. You see, for most of our careers, it's been fine to develop media thinking in an orderly and sequential way, because that's how media were developing. Risk aversion was a perfectly serviceable marketing strategy. Marketing conservatism, deliberately limiting the pace of change by the Sir Humphreys of marketing, was celebrated by companies as, frankly, a responsible way of doing business, of managing young and excitable people and avoiding mistakes. And in some places it still is. In such a context, this year's marketing solution looked a lot like last year's and the one before. And we used to joke in the early days in the media department that many of our clients were really pretty happy if we just Tipexed out the date, Tipex note, remember that? Tipexed out the date on the media plan and wrote in the new date. But when a chief executive wants to transform a company, there is one particular tool that is essential. When you need to make change which recognizes a dead stop and a new start, this one tool that is essential is the zero-based budget, the one that makes every component of spend remake its case. In such times of transformation, there's never been a better time to create the zero-based marketing plan, to ensure that the brand planning that you're doing is relevant to new developments in the nature of society, in the nature of culture, individualism, and attitudes to media and advertising, and all the new behaviours that arise out of these. So when people use the term tried and tested solutions now, I have a mild panic attack. Tried, tested, so reassuring, so proven, so familiar, so treacherous. Tried in different circumstances and tested under conditions which no longer apply. So this morning, I want to start by looking at a change in three ways, ask why it's so hard, and then I want to make some recommendations. First, I want to talk about a new communications template. This is not an original piece of thinking, but I can't trace the originator of this, otherwise I would credit him or her with it. But I think it's a really interesting way of looking at our communications strategies now. Second, I want to talk about open source marketing. And third, what happens when advertising and marketing moves out of a clutter to become a conversation, picking up on the points that Matt just made. So first, my template for evaluating the breadth of communications. And here it is. On the one hand, the brand. On the other hand, the customer. And between them, bought media, owned media, and earned media. It's always been the case that the communications between a company and its customers and potential customers, because you could usefully be categorized in this way. Bought communications have always been our advertising, expensive but controllable, pretty measurable, and proven tools. Owned media have always been essentially the promotional claims made on company-owned real estate, like packaging, brochures, store cards, headed note papers, the company's vans, whatever it may be. And earned communications are the holy grail, the word of mouth. When I was at business school, there was a theory going around that one positive evangelist would tell 8 people about the qualities of your product, and a negative evangelist would tell 22. I'm never quite sure how they got those numbers, but the principle was about right. Now, if you take that same template and look at that in the internet age, the boundaries are arguably just as clear as before, but the level of engagement with owned media is very significantly greater through companies' websites and owned pieces of real estate like a brand's Facebook page, for example, or blogs. The massive difference is that previously owned content needed old media to distribute it. And old media were expensive. In some cases, what you were doing was kind of illegal because of the differences on television between content and advertising, or like advertiser-funded programming, just exceptionally hard to execute. The development of the internet makes it important that companies therefore put at least as much effort into their websites as into their ad campaigns. But that's not what's happening, is it? And if you're sitting there thinking right now, oh God, please don't show my website, as an example, you know what you've got to do when you get back to the base. The quality of companies' websites has improved dramatically from the days when it was kind of actually left to the sort of enthusiasts, the group from the post room who kind of got this stuff to throw something together. But there are still those companies who see the website as being something like an annual report, a static repository of facts about the organization, rather than an opportunity to own your own medium, to run a daily show, inviting customers to participate, to engage, to come back for more. Here's one of my favorites, Goo. It changes every day. There is just a facility on the bottom right of the screen here to click to play, a little kind of one-armed bandit kind of thing, you win chocolate. You perhaps can't see with the lights, but on the far side there, there's an opportunity. If you work for a company that has more than 100 employees, you can apply to have the Goo bike come round, bringing chocolate for everybody in the company and be the hero of the day. And further down the site, you've got some top tracks. What is a chocolate company doing providing me with top tracks to listen to during the course of the day? It's just getting me to its website. It's giving me fun there. And then what they do on this site is they say, now what would you like next? What do you fancy next? Should we do chocolate ice cream, chocolate brownies, or chocolate dipping sauce? You know, it is a living, breathing thing. It is a news, information, and entertainment medium wholly owned by this company to which people will return. I think this is a high-growth opportunity for most companies right now. And incidentally, our hosts have some groovy tools to help companies experiment with their websites to improve response. You see, great owned media like that, which are authentic, uncontrived, and genuinely helpful, informative, or entertaining, are the ticket to the big win, the viral, the earned communications, as people share the love, the game, the joke, the knowledge. I only have to mention Dove or Cadbury's as great examples of earned communication. But we shouldn't go away with the idea that success on that scale is the only success. Because a communication strategy integrated across those three zones is entirely achievable by all brands with an accompanying enhancement in their communications. The social networks are, I think, very important part of improving the capacity of great earned communications as people discuss stuff they're interested in, which includes brands, where they recommend, where they advise, and in some cases even badge themselves with brands. So I hope this way of looking at things creates a good tool for an audit of your company's marketing communications and encouraging the others. Before we leave this thought, remember that earning means earning. It's the hardest thing to do, and when you've been in marketing and advertising as long as I have, earning is not something you kind of buy stuff because then you control it. So you buy, you don't earn, and people like me kind of think in that way, and it's tempting for companies, I think, to try and think, how do we buy this stuff that we should be earning? Beware. You may have seen the idea by Chevrolet for their SUV brand, the Tahoe. Some bright spark came up with the idea of plugging the Tahoe into the craze of user-generated content. In principle, a great idea. Post some fabulous footage on your website, together with samples of stirring music, and invite users to add their own words to create an ad for the 2007 Tahoe, which of course they would then email to all their friends, creating a viral campaign. Just for added beauty, the campaign launched off the back of one of the challenges in the US version of The Apprentice, in which customers were designing Tahoe ads. Fantastic integrated communications. I expect some people did make an attempt at an authentic ad, but YouTube is mainly populated with these. To their credit, GM did host all of those on their website. They didn't take any of them down. And they declared themselves pretty happy with the level of engagement and interest the campaign had created. Second, open source marketing. Open source thinking is making its way from the tech economy, most notably from the extraordinary and at that point unprecedented Linux project into the mainstream. See, in the tech world, there is a sense that business life is too hard, too unpredictable to continue with that sort of art of war approach that says if you're not on my payroll or my customer, then you are probably my enemy. Hence, an open source mentality developing over the internet, where participants actively look for alliances, partnerships, informal rendezvous that suit both parties for a period. And if you look at the growth of the iPod or Facebook, this has been driven hard by third-party other companies, invited in by them and shown the source code. Now, this is unprecedented corporate behavior. It's creeping into the wider business world, and in particular the media, where company interrelationships that would have previously been dismissed as too complex or too competitive are working because participants have dropped the attitude that a successful deal means walking away with more than the other guy. You maybe saw the announcement on Monday of a tie-up between the BBC and Scottish Television to share news support services. Though in the light of yesterday's news that the government proposes to top slice 3.5% off a licence fee for local news, a cynic might say that the BBC was just getting its response in first. However, this is an attitude that I think now permeates the web. I think it is a genuinely new thing. It's being adopted by individuals. Here's slide share where you can go and look up other people's presentations, not pirated, uploaded by them there to be open source, to share the ideas, to pay it forward. Here's Matt Mason's very good website for his very good book, The Pirate's Dilemma. On the right-hand side there it says, buy the US edition from Amazon or Barnes & Noble. Down at the bottom of the page it says, buy the UK edition from Amazon or Waterstones. And tell you what, at the top there, top right, it says, download the book and pay what you like. And yes, it does work if you put in $0. Not that I'd obviously do that. All a bit edgy, all a bit kind of futuristic. Well, let me invite you to think about one of the most traditional and secretive marketing organizations that you can. Anybody thinking of Procter & Gamble? The Ministry of Marketing? Would it surprise you to know that for the last 3 years, P&G have been embarked upon what they call an open innovation program, through which they plan to get at least half of their new ideas from outside the company. And that the quid pro quo of that is that they plan to release their patents 5 years after lodging them, or 3 years after a product is first shipped. At the corporate level, media or personal, this is genuinely new behavior, which must be embraced into today's marketing culture. Third, clutter to communication. Combination of technology and individualism has allowed our communication with customers to move from the carpet bombing them with advertising messages to relationship building. As we move from mass to personal communications, the consumer has gone from recipient to participant, which means that brand management is not what it used to be. 3 years ago at Engage, the IAB's annual conference, Niall Fitzgerald, the former chairman and chief executive of Unilever, told us that he spent a career with brand managers telling him his advertising was having a conversation with the housewife. Of course, he's doing no such thing, he told us. And then he said, it's a monologue that we hoped at best they were listening into. But he went on to say, finally, we know the consumer is listening because now she's talking back. This is enormously significant, but it's also much more tricky. Relationships are much more complex than monologues. Interaction, feedback, commentary, comparison, reviews, blogs, even spoof ads mean that the brand owners is no longer the only hand on the tiller that steers public perceptions of his product. But relationships beget conversations, the currency of marketplaces. And if markets are ordinary conversations, broadband technology and web inventions have created something extraordinary. With Twitter, Facebook, MySpace, Bebo, Second Life, instant messaging, email, blogs, Skype, the internet is alive with conversations. 1.6 billion people, a quarter of the population of the planet, have been joining the internet party at the rate of 100 million a year. 100 million a year. And being connected to the internet, they are now connected to each other. Big point. We'll come back to it. Very tempting for marketeers then to think that today's challenge is to find a way of inserting ourselves into those conversations. Now that is tried and tested thinking. Engage the consumer in something that interests them and then interrupt it with an ad. That's the way we've always done things. It's one of the styles of old thinking that doesn't work in this economy. Here we have a much more interesting mission to allow customers to have a conversation with us on their terms and whenever they choose. So these are new challenges. The tools that we've used to engage with stuff over the last 50 years aren't good enough, because these are tools that were forged at a time when everything was a variant of something that had gone before. Our culture of marketing has at its core the ease and utility of mass communications, and our instincts, or my instincts, that of my generation, have largely been forged in that world. But then that was a time when consumers expected advertising to address them as one of the crowd. Indeed, it was a time when conformity was much preferred to individualism. My parents aspired to be respectable. That was a word that was used a great deal in my childhood, being respectable people. A designation we'd all run a mile from now, in favour of some element of personal distinctiveness, which we expressed through our behaviour and our brand clothing, or in the case of this young lady, by tattooing our tongues. I'm going to move on from that image because I think it's fairly disturbing. Today, the mass engagement of audiences is of course not gone. I'm certainly not a believer in that. One of the great roles of media remains to go large and hit many millions of people with an advertising message on the same day or even in the same break. But this is also a world where a very much greater level of personalization is now possible, And more importantly, it's a world where individuals prefer to be understood as and treated as individuals, where the consumption of media is already moving from scheduled events shared with the many to content on demand and customized and watched individually. Now, as well as causing all this disruption, digital media also provides new tools to help secure their benefits. Take targeting, the facility of robots to gather information about my online behavior, which can be used to serve me with content and advertising that reflect my interests and purchase intention. This is a game changer for advertisers. Finally, we get beyond classifying huge, widely diverse, disparate globs of humanity in huge socio-demographic silos where they can be conveniently counted by diary research. Because my preferences are now part of the targeting equation, the advertising I receive can be of interest to me, even welcomed by me, yielding its sponsors a better return on investment. Indeed, I go further. We all know that if we want to persuade our partner of something, picking the moment is crucial. Selling an idea well demands a level of targeting that is far more granular than how old are you, what's your income. But who are you today? How do you feel? What would you like to talk about? This is a level of granularity that is volunteered by users of social networks all the time, users of instant messaging all the time. I'm tired out, I'm lonely, I'm happy. Or, from the marketeer's point of view, more directionally, I need a holiday, my camera's broken, fancy going to the flicks. Real-time engagement with real people whose interests, passions, likes and dislikes you know is clearly incomparable with a media targeting system invented in the days when most of us consumed the same media on the same night. A conversation defined not by, but with people not defined by age, class and gender, but self-defined as interested buyers, and a conversation that allows them to talk back and even to buy with a click of their fingers. Because captivating advertising that sings, dances, persuades, and then takes orders is the promise, in place of the traditional advertising deal where the showroom assistant who welcomes you to the store makes the pitch and then walks away. He may have convinced you, but he doesn't give you the opportunity to do anything about it. So who wouldn't exchange an opportunity to see for a well-timed conversation? But we're going to have to fight for this. The impact of the internet is too great for elected officials to ignore it. Stephen Carter's Digital Britain report, published yesterday, is the work of one member of government, probably the one member of the government who understands the issues, but he's leaving. What worries me is that everywhere in the world there will be new legislation driven by politicians seeking to enhance their standing in their local constituency, rather than with any understanding of the commercial issues, by cracking down hard on the sort of technology that we've been discussing under the banner of preserving privacy. Yet the fact that a machine somewhere is serving me more interesting ads, more relevant content, because it has logged my online behavior, is no more an infringement of my human rights or my privacy than a great concierge who knows my behavior well, recommending a great restaurant. Or Amazon using my previous purchases to suggest books or music that I might enjoy. Incidentally, one of the aspects of Amazon that almost everybody says is genuinely brilliant, it's behavioral targeting. It's a cookie, for goodness sake. Meanwhile, I think that there is an unwritten understanding developing that there's a fair trade to be done. That if I want valuable content for free, then in exchange I give my attention and my data by authorizing a server somewhere to collect information about my online usage, hold it anonymously, and see if it can find usable patterns within it. This is a view picked up in yesterday's Digital Britain report, quoting Milena Kuneva, the EU Consumer Affairs Commissioner, who said in March this year, personal data is the new oil of the internet and the new currency of the digital world. It's a transaction capable with good disclosure and transparency of taking place 1 million times a day, 1 billion times a day. It is part of a real-time world which is data-rich, more dynamic, more granular than anything we could have ever worked with before. And the biggest mistake that we could make now is to assume that the tools of our trade that have worked just fine for the last 50 years will work just fine for the next 50. And yet, deep down in our DNA, and in the DNA of our companies, lurks a determined hope that things haven't really changed that much. Because, just change is difficult. Quite normal for us to underreact to it, or to postpone our reaction to it, rather than overreact. Not just as an industry, although advertisers are notoriously conservative about media usage, but actually as a species, we just prefer the familiar to the different. It's a physiological fact that our operating systems tire much more quickly when we're asking them to process new information, like sitting at a conference all day, looking at dolphins when it gets dull, or being on a long train journey, or the first day in a new job. That's why those things are so draining. So when change is blunting our old tools, reducing the effectiveness of the tried and tested, there is a kind of capacity to go into denial about that, postpone decisions, see how things go. And one of the techniques we use to let ourselves off a bit is to dress the new in the clothes of the old, the garb we know. We've always done it. It comes really quite naturally to us. The steam locomotive, an invention that would change the lives of billions of people forever, was originally dubbed the Iron Horse. Similarly, the motor car was christened the horseless carriage, as if it's a kind of line extension from a stagecoach. Where reference points don't exist for something unprecedented, it's understandable to draft in terminology from the familiar. Anyone still talk about taping a show on Sky Plus or online newspapers? It's quite understandable. The problem with it is it conditions a response to the not to the new, but to the variant of a familiar, to a chapter change rather than the start of a new book. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is not a new chapter. It is a new book. Today's example of the horseless carriage, if you get my drift, is the mobile phone. It's an internet browser, it's a camera, it's a video camera, it's a GPS satellite navigation system, an MP3 player, a calculator, an alarm clock, a diary, a contact book, a games player. In time it will be a wallet, already is in some parts of the world, and also it will become a set-top box capable of connecting our television inputs to other devices. In Western Europe, there are more mobile phones than people. And in the developing world, the mobile handset will, and already is, leapfrogging the computer since it's cheaper and doesn't need wires in the ground. Already, over half the population of the planet has one. To say that again, already over half the population of the planet has one. This is a device that is changing the world. But for all this extraordinary capacity, still we have it named after the telephone. We've been talking about convergence seemingly forever, but now it's plain to see that the television, the computer, the mobile handset are the same device with different screens. All that, whatever one can do, the others can do, and all that's different is the scale of the computing and the font size. Now, we're not yet at a point where consumers use these interchangeably, so we have to think about the implications of this. We have time to think about the implications of this. But my point is that we really must be thinking about that now, what it means not just for our advertising, but for all of our interactions with consumers. Other gizmos will join this merging club, again with specific features and the right size screen for the job, but they too will be just computers, like readers, technology that's working with the grain of behavioral change, the migration of content from the physical to the digital, which they will accelerate. And I don't think I'm tempting fate to predict that the replacement of physical objects by digital objects will continue, and that will change the way that we read, the way that we watch, the way that we listen. Throughout the history of media, because the game stayed the same, it has favoured the big and the deep-rooted. And the strong media brands were like oaks, planted firmly in the consciousness of the community. They could be relied upon to stand whatever evolution threw at them. But in today's media forest, the idea is more important than the brand. After a working life in media and advertising, I never thought I'd hear myself say something like that. But many, many media owners thought that the longevity, the love, and the trust of their brands would be a slam dunk combination to repel borders. But those same firms now find themselves in a real fight against the utility, practicality, and speed of startup contenders invented in the last 10 years. TV, press, radio, cinema, we could add music and games. Online, the historic difference between their means of distribution and their creative diversity, which is how we've differentiated media, means nothing. Online, everyone's noughts and ones are the same. Online, a newspaper company can tell its stories with video as well as texts, with audio and podcasts, and the tools at its disposal are exactly the same as those available to the ITV or Classic FM. And only history will care that the company who placed those images or that video started life as a TV, a newspaper, or a radio enterprise. The enduring media companies will be the ones who've stopped looking to their heritage for the future. who are now engaged on adding pace and agility to their brand equity, extending it by experimental steps into new circumstances. And likewise, the winning marketers will find new ways to navigate effectively through this extraordinary archipelago of new choices, and having mapped the current changes, being prepared to invent a new business approach that factors in change as a future constant. What's particularly important for advertisers is that for the foreseeable future, the have it now, have it free culture of the internet favours an advertising funded model above all others. And so all around Planet Media, we see companies giving up selling content to users in favour of giving away the content and selling the users to advertisers. When I became chairman of the IAB in 2003, there was still a lot of people saying, look, it's an unproven medium, look at the dot-com boom and bust. Lucky we weren't caught up in that. A response designed to post-rationalise a lack of understanding, a shortage of confidence, which of course they had. The millennial boom and bust were about valuations and investment. They had nothing to do with the scale of discovery of online content and communications, whose growth was splendidly unaffected by investors' premature enthusiasms. Note, premature, not misplaced. But if I had to characterise the position now, I'd say that in most of, if not all, media companies, there's a much more sophisticated understanding of how to engage with customers digitally without looking like a Charlie. But there is still a kind of post-rationalisation about. And it goes like this. It says, oh yes, we've seen what's going on out there and we've responded accordingly. From a position where 3 years ago we spent virtually nothing online, we now commit up to 5% of our budget into digital media. 5% says we've nailed it, as if this unprecedented opportunity to build relationships with customers in real time as participants is on a par with Channel 5. There's a second half to this sentence, which is important and which creates the ground for a very fruitful partnership. The internet needs advertising, and advertisers cannot do without the internet. So finally, on the principle that we all aspire to be geniuses, I've entitled the final section of this talk, What Would a Genius Do Now? And this is the point where I'm really maybe preaching most to the converted, so I urge you to take this as ammunition pour encourager les autres. Number one, call change, change. Ask what new behaviours the change demands, and what old behaviours are now past their sell-by date. Does the website need investment? And if you were to rebuild your brand's media plan from the ground up, armed only with information about the current behaviour of your target audience, uninformed by what you did last year, what would your zero-based marketing plan look like? Don't be ashamed to copy best practice, get great advice, and experiment. Number two, think open source. How would your marketing approach change if you suspended suspicion? Could you share expensive media with other advertisers? Which media owners are after the same people as you? Is there more to do than buy ads off them? And three, participate personally. One way you might do that is to attend the IAB's Engage conference in November this year. If you drop me a business card, I'll ensure you get an invitation. It's free to advertisers. If you're from Google, we'll gouge you, but for advertisers, it's free. But I think at that conference in 2005, Sir Martin Sorrell identified the 50-something marketing or advertising executive, 50-year-old, who is desperately hoping that he, usually a he, can retire before he has to get his head around all this digital stuff. Now, I suspect that most of Martin's refuseniks would self-define themselves out at events like today, so here we go in preaching to converted. But in getting one's head around the new, I think there is no better plan than to participate personally. Just because it's entertaining doesn't mean to say it's not work. That's what I tell myself, at least. But give yourself time to look at what is going on online or in mobile. Have an iPhone. You need one. You need to know what is going on. Join a social network, not LinkedIn. Read We Think by Charles Leadbeater, a book which starts with the very reassuring words, if you're not perplexed, you should be. After that, it's pretty plain sailing. Or indeed, the aforementioned Pirate's Dilemma by Matt Mason. Subscribe to a couple of relevant blogs. TechCrunch, Mashable are not filled with geek words. They're free, and in my view, they're as important as the Financial Times. Make time to play. Go to a site like StumbleUpon or Dig, where people recommend stuff. Pursue your own passions online. For me, it's music, nobly served by some genuinely beautiful online services. And have some fun. My current favourite in this department is Failblog. It is a stupendous store of fabulous goofs uploaded by individuals from around the world. Some video, actually quite a lot, just static photographs of fabulous mistakes. It never fails to reward a few minutes spending time on it. But don't do what I did, which was to have a look at it in the middle of a rather long and tedious conference call when I saw this. I'm not sure if you can read it from where you are. Like you, I spontaneously burst out laughing, forcing everybody to on the conference call to ask what the hell was going on, and they then all had to go and have a look for themselves. Incidentally, to silence the cynic in me, and since I was mentioning this today, I did check, and there is indeed a company called Mitchell's Wholesale Providors in Southwest Wales. However, as far as I'm aware, there is no Mitchell's Horse. Thanks a lot for listening.
Thank you very much, Richard. Stay there for one moment, if you would. That was, as ever, thoroughly insightful, eloquent, erudite, thought-provoking, as ever Richard can be, and also clearly a massive plug for his own conference in the autumn. We've got, I think, just 3 or 4 minutes, if we could, for questions for Richard. There will be mics roving. I'm sure there's many things we'd like to kick off, but I'm sure, as I know, you're always very shy. I'll kick off with perhaps a couple, or maybe just the one, by starting, Richard, with the thought that you looked at Channel 4. I thought it was fascinating, as the start of fragmentation in media, and that old tools are simply not good enough in the current marketplace. So, how do we continue to get this message through? I mean, clearly platforms like this, perhaps, but how do we get clients, planners, the agency community to change in the way that you've done it? What more do we need to do to get that change going?
I think part of it is that there's a natural process in that people my age retire, and they sort of cleanse the pool as people your age come in, and as people who are marketing experts who've kind of grown up with this stuff, to use the cliched term, the digital natives start to gain control of marketing budgets. Then I think the change kind of happens automatically. I genuinely think that it is exceptionally hard to change the mind of a company chief executive. I was called into a company the other day to see a company's chief executive who said this to me: for the whole of my business life, I have used my instincts to build this business. I've used my instincts on pricing, on product development, because I know what the consumer wants. And I've got these people in my company now, aged between 25 and 30, telling me what we need to do. And I suspect that they're right, but I have no instincts. So I need to find a way of merging an approach that has served me well for 35 years with a whole set of new circumstances. I think that's exceptionally hard for people to do. I mean, good for him that he'd recognise that's what the issue. But I think many will refuse to go against their instincts and frustrate the intentions of many people represented here to get change. So, I mean, the IAB, its role is to try and kind of midwife that change. And if you can get those guys to come to the conference, that's what it's there to do.
Okay, so a couple of questions from the floor, if we have any for Richard. Don't be shy, I am going to stay you out. Thank you. One at the back there. If you give your name and who you work for. We can't see you from here.
Hi there. My name is Brandon Keenan with Platform A. Just a really quick question about open sourcing, because I understand open sourcing with technology and with medical and sharing prescriptions to save the world and all the reasons for that. But how do you expect marketers to open source? I mean, are you talking about open sourcing their data? I mean, are you talking about? I mean, open source is a collaborative effort to share everything. I mean, in a sense, marketing is still a bit of, I mean, there's competition there. So to release all your information might be a bit complicated. So what is your, I mean, you talked about maybe sharing some ad space, but the true meaning of open sourcing, what are your strategies on that?
Yeah, I'm using open source as a kind of shorthand for a state of mind that, frankly, again, has pertained throughout my working life, which says that, you know, if you're outside of our doors, unless you're our customer, then, you know, then you probably want something from us that we don't want to give you. So I think that I think what I'm talking about is the kind of collaborations that I described, I think, between marketers and companies, for sure, sharing data. You know, if I'm a TV company, if I'm Channel 4, let's say, and I have no relationship with Channel 4, but if I'm Channel 4 pursuing a particular kind of audience, and so is your brand, then sure, why don't we share our research? Why don't we share our understanding of developing trends in that marketplace with a view to collaboration rather than just learning more from each other? So I do think that there's a route forward here. It's a frame of mind, though, that is genuinely new. That was what I was trying to draw attention to.
It'd be nice if Google could just open source first and just give us all their data right away. That'd be
That would be nice, wouldn't it? Any other questions? Yeah, one just down here.
Greg Grimmer, Harold Mosley, Dawson and Grimmer.
Hi,
So I'm going to steal that communications template. I've been using a far inferior one for a long time. So yeah, I'll source you, Richard, on that one. Question on that. Yeah, when I ran a media agency, I had fantastic success in driving the 3-to-1 ratio that Matt Britton talked about amongst e-commerce companies, killing yellow pages through Google AdWords. Now I'm working in a full-service creative environment. I'm having immense trouble getting clients to actually want to entertain and educate through, let's call it YouTube, rather than actually using AdWords. How do we actually get the advertising community to start killing ITV through the internet rather than yellow pages through the internet?
So to get...
So again, it's display versus search, simple as that. So yeah, at the moment, your earned word of mouth template means that we're doing it through blogs or through free advertising on the web. Yeah, Mark still gets 99% of his revenue through AdWords and less than 1% through YouTube. How do we go about changing that for Mark and others?
I think if the question is how do we engage marketers in thinking in that new way, then I think it is part of the evolutionary process that I've talked about. If you go and talk to some of the agencies which used to represent Greg, but you know they're finding quite a lot of people pitching up at their doors saying, "Can I have one of those viral things? You know, just get me viral." And I think there's a kind of danger there that you kind of finish up with something like the sort of Chevy thing, which I thought was fabulous. And there are various others, crackingly awful examples of marketing companies saying, here's this new thing we don't really understand, but we're going to go and belong to it. You know, it's not authentic. And I think that is a critical word that kind of has to be at the center of this kind of communications, because you know, the crowd spots a failure of authenticity in a heartbeat. You know, they're kind of looking for it anyway, especially with larger corporations. Yeah, everybody is looking for large corporations that say one thing and then do something else. So, as I said, these relationships which are the holy grail, are exceptionally difficult to manage, much more difficult than the kind of than the bought communications, but hugely valuable. I think it is hard to persuade advertisers to do this well and to go and experiment with it. But I think that's a key word. Mm. I think experimentation, moving with small steps, actually being prepared to move back. If I may just for 30 seconds more, so just say, again, I think that is a factor of my generation of executive, that going back, that trying something and coming back from it is regarded as being a terrible failure. Actually, it seems to me most of the things on the internet have been developed by that iterative process. And it works these days far better than the old way.
As Google would say, always be in beta. Keep testing, keep testing, keep testing. Yeah. On that note, I say thank you very much to Richard. I thought it was absolutely inspiring and a great start to the conference. I'm going to give you all now a quick and a very short 10 minutes, please, back in here, coffee fix, and then we'll carry on with the next session. Thank you very much, Richard.